quite difficult for everybody. I've been requested to cover less syllabus. I mean, anyway, my plan was aligned with that. So I'm going to basically finish whatever I've uploaded on the slides, finish going through whatever I've uploaded on the slides. And actually, I'll be covering one less slide deck than I've uploaded online, possibly. And then this will also be a logical end for this part because it's end of module 1. We will, when we resume post midsem, we will start with module 2, where we will learn things about MaxFlow MinCut. So that's going to be a little more graph theory and a lot of applications of that. Yeah, great. So let's get started with today's discussion. If you recall, we are trying to solve the shortest path problem when the weights on the edges are allowed to be negative, and we are also considering the graphs which are acyclic. Not only do they not have negative weight cycles, they also do not have any cycles. Okay, so that was the setup we were in the last video or last live interaction. So here also this algorithm is basically ascribed to Bellman and Ford, and um, it's very similar to the DFS algorithm that you have studied, but with some important differences. As this is a dynamic programming algorithm, we'll try to put it in the framework we have developed for dynamic programming algorithms. So I'll go through the 5 steps that we need to analyze this problem. And then we will, so then you'll get another instance of how these 5 steps work. So that's another goal of this exercise. But also along the way, we will develop this full algorithm called the Bellman and Ford's algorithm. In the textbooks, it is not explained as these 5 steps, but the textbook exposition is also very nice. So you can also look at that. So first thing in our steps of problem solving is how to come up with the different sub-problems that will be useful in defining the recursion. So in this case, you could define 2 types of sub-problems. I've chosen to define one type, which will be useful, but I'll tell you about the other one as well. So we define a sub-problem called opt of v comma t, where t is the sink vertex, the vertex to which we need a path from, say, a source vertex, say S. So we want opt of v comma t. So this is going to hold, this subproblem is going to hold the value of the minimum weight path from V to T. Overall, of course, we plan to compute opt of S comma T. And now for any vertex V in V, if we are able to compute opt of V comma T, then in fact we'll be done. We could have also defined another type of subproblem here, namely opt of S comma V, where I store the minimum weight path from S to V, and then eventually I hope to compute opt of S comma T. Okay, I have not done that here, but that is a possibility, of course. But we will stick to the definition that I have on the slides, which is opt of V comma T. So these are going to be our subproblems. Okay, you could have come up with many other type of subproblems, but this is what we are coming up with. In terms of these string words or something like that, sequences, problems over sequences and strings, this may be thought of as a kind of problem where we are considering suffixes. But that's just an analogy. Concretely speaking, we try to compute recursively values for opt of v comma t. Okay, so then if this is my subproblem, how should I define my recursion? Okay, that's obviously step number 2. Designing the recursion, we can say for some v, let capital P denote the optimal path from v to t that corresponds to the value opt v comma t. So the path is not being stored in v comma t, only the value of the path is being stored in v comma t. But let's say the path corresponding to that is p. Okay, so the best path, so we have this graph, it's like a tag. So all the edges are going in one direction. This is S, this is T. And in general, I'm trying to compute for some vertex V, VT. Okay, this is also a subgraph. It has many edges and so on, right? So maybe the opt path in this is this one. Okay, the red path is say the opt one. We don't know what it is, obviously, but of course in the graph there exists such a path. The path P must use some vertex U among the neighbors of V. So let's say this is U. So I can now say that opt of Vt is nothing but opt of Ut plus weight of Vu. Okay, so suppose I know the actual opt path, then I can obviously write the overall optimum for V comma T instance as broken down into these two parts. One is the weight of the edge Vu and the second is the opt for U comma T. That makes sense. Where Vu is the first edge going out of V along this optimal path P. But the issue here is that unfortunately we don't know which among these U's among the neighbors of V will eventually lead to an optimal path. This is something we don't know. So what is the best way to handle this situation? It is very similar to what we have seen in the past, which is just do min over all possible choices for this value. So I don't know a priori which among the neighbors of V will work out, will be along the optimal path, but I know it has to be one of them. That's for sure. So there is some path that is optimal between V and T. There is some vertex that is neighbor of V along that path. The problem is if we knew that U, we could have just written opt of Vt equal to that with respect to that U. But unfortunately, we don't know what that U is. Just like in parenthesization problem that we saw earlier, we didn't know where is it going to be the best first outermost parenthesis. Okay? So we had to guess. And the guessing is kind of moved to this part where I do min, max, or whatever is my optimization problem, depending on my optimization problem. In this case, we want to find the minimum weight path. So naturally, we need to select that U which minimizes this quantity. And that's really my recursion. Okay. So I have the recursion now. Next thing is obviously what should I store? The memoization strategy. Even this is quite simple over here. Remember the values of opt of U comma T for previously computed U. That's all I need to remember at any given time. So we don't know. So what we are planning to do is slowly make progress from the frontier that starts at T. So this is my graph. This is S, this is T. I look at the first frontier here and I build opt of U comma T for U that lie in this frontier. Then I look at the next frontier. By frontier, I just mean vertices which have direct edges to the previous frontier. So initially my frontier is just T. So I look at all the vertices which have edges to direct edges to T. So that's my frontier here. Then I look at all the vertices that have direct edges to the vertices I just considered and therefore paths to T, and so on and so forth till I finally reach S. So I built from these smaller subproblems, and the memoization strategy is simply keep track of the values for opt of U comma T for various U's that I keep computing from the smallest to the largest, from the closest to T to the furthest to T. Now, acyclic dependencies on these subproblems is also quite clear because the graph itself is acyclic. So when I move these frontiers back and back and back and back, it's not like I'm going to form a cycle within the graph because the graph itself, I've been assured, is acyclic. So the acyclicity of my subproblems, which are these opt of u comma t, just follows directly from the fact that the underlying graph itself is acyclic. Finally, the time complexity. How long will the algorithm, Bellman and Ford algorithm, take in order to um, compute the optimal? So now the time complexity is the number of subproblems that I'm going to come up with and the time I need per subproblem. Okay. So I claim that the total number of subproblems is cardinality V. Why? Because there is one subproblem defined u comma t for each u in V. So there is one such subproblem. So total number of subproblems is equal to the total number of vertices, maybe minus one or something like that, but of the order of cardinality V. But how does one argue about the time required per subproblem? Why is that V plus 1? So let me give you 1 minute either to ask questions related to what I just worked out or to comment on why do you think this quantity is V plus 1 or what else should it be? Okay, I think comments are already coming in. But in any case, please comment or give thumbs up to existing comments. Let me wait for 1 full minute. Let's see. Mhm. Mhm. Hmm. All good points. Lots of comments. If others are not checking, please check the comments. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Very good. So indeed, everything that all of you have said is kind of correct. Let me take a couple of comments one by one. So one of the comments is that uh, the time per subproblem depends on the total number of edges incoming. That's a very good observation. That's indeed correct because what is the time required per subproblem? Firstly, I'll have to look up the value of opt of ut, which should be computed somewhere prior to uh, opt of vt, because we know acyclicity is assuring that when I'm trying to compute opt of vt, opt of ut is already there. And I'm not, I mean, basically for any subproblem, I'm only looking at subproblems that are in some sense smaller than it. So this value is there. So maybe this just looking up this value is going to take order one time. Weight of VT, VU also is going to take only order one time because this is part of the input. For every edge, it's weight. Maybe I have random access on my input. So I just take one order one time to look up the weight of the edge. So to compute this quantity, I'm just going to take order one time actually. But what do I actually need to compute? I need to compute min over such values. So I need to look at all possible U's that are outgoing from V. Okay. And So this may be U1, U2, UT. And for each one of them, firstly, I need to compute such a value of which this and this are already available somewhere stored. This is due to memoization, this is due to the input. So I compute these, and then for each one of them, I take order one time, and then I do min over them. So this whole operation is going to take O of t time. And t can be at most cardinality v minus 1. Because you are a vertex and the graph is acyclic, so there are no self loops. So if at all you will be pointing edges towards at most v minus 1 other vertices. So your neighbor set will be at most v minus 1. Right? So instead of incoming in that comment, it should have been outgoing possibly. But other than that, the idea is exactly correct. Okay? So, and for that reason, we'll get cardinality. Actually, this is also cardinality v minus 1, the first one also. Because number of subproblems also for t, we don't need a separate subproblem. Opt of t comma t, though we already know is 0. So we don't need a separate subproblem for that. So even the first guy should be v minus 1 and the second also should be v minus 1. The v minus 1s are coming for different reasons, but the idea is correct for the second one. So that's it. We have solved the whole problem. The only thing I have not done here is I've not given you the pseudocode for Bellman and Ford. Right? So I have not told you step by step what to do. I agree with that. We'll come to it shortly. But before we go there, let me handle a slightly tricky question now. What if I tell you that the cyclicity assumption, we made, no more holds? So I'll give you the guarantee that there are no negative weight cycles in my graph. So for example, if you recall, one example we drew last time was this was 2, 1, say 2, minus 10, 1, 3, 2, something like that. So this graph has a negative cycle. This is 10. Because if we add the weights along a cycle, they become a negative weight. They add to a negative number. On the other hand, suppose I have something like this. Okay, so instead of minus 10, it's just minus 1. Now, this graph has a cycle, and this has negative cycles. No negative cycles. So suppose we are in this situation where we are guaranteed that we don't have cycles, but we could possibly have negative cycles. Okay. Is there a way to adapt this algorithm or this thought process in the case when there are no negative cycles? Immediately you will observe things like acyclicity is no more guaranteed in this situation. Because the graph has cycles, so you could keep on going to a vertex prior to yours in a frontier, but these frontiers could be dependent on each other. You know, when you try to do frontier for this, you come to this. Then when you try to do frontier for this, you come to this. Then you try to do a frontier for this, you come to this. When you try to do a frontier for this, you come to this, you know. So it can create cycles. So the dependency of the subproblems is no more acyclic in this case. So my question to you is there a way out of this? Okay, so that's a very interesting problem. And in fact, we are going to see just now in the next 10 minutes or so that in fact that also can be solved. with a very, very similar type of thought process. Okay, so that's what we will do next. So I want to say that maybe we will, I had another slide deck, but I don't want to show it on purpose. So if we, there is a good chance that we may end early also. So, there'll be quite a few happy emojis. So we will end when I finish making this point about how to handle the case when there are no negative cycles. Okay. So one question about this problem is when there are no negative cycles that has come up in the comments is that can we pre-run a DFS and then choose the vertices with later finishing times in the DFS? So DFS actually is supposed to run for shortest paths, but if you have cycles and there are cycles and there are negative weights along the edges, already it's not clear what it means to run the DFS. DFS's answer could be substantially different from the correct answer. For example, DFS may output a path which is a minimum weight, but in the overall graph, it may not actually be. So it's not clear even what to me what it means to run a DFS on a graph which has negative weights on it. Another idea that has come up in the comments is let's keep track of the vertices under observation and assign infinity. When we encounter it in the subproblem cycle. I don't quite understand what it means, but yeah, I didn't understand the second comment all that well. But I believe it is kind of what Kanav is suggesting, which is like keeping infinities, etc., looks a lot like DFS to me again. So maybe you are also suggesting a variant of the DFS. Fine. But here is a very, very cute and beautiful idea to actually make underlying structures which are cyclic to make them acyclic. Okay? Which is to use a notion of, say, timestamps or something like that. Okay, so let me explain to you what we can do. There is another comment by Chandrasekhar, so which says that, but then all the values in the cycle will become infinity. Correct. So if you try to do DFS, it will get stuck. This I can tell you. Okay. So let's go on. I'm going to tell you how to fix this issue. So note we have cycles in the graph, but we are assured that there are no negative cycles in the graph. Okay. That's the situation we are in, and we want to develop a dynamic programming algorithm. And here, if you see the solution that I'll just show you, the most ingenious step is to come up with the right subproblem. Okay. So I've been saying that maybe often coming up with subproblems is easier. And indeed, in most situations, it is easier. In that, for example, for string problems or sequences and so on, often it's going to be the suffix, prefix, interval, subsequence, something like that. Okay. But not here. So I'll define my subproblem as follows. You have my subproblem is opt of v comma I. Or if I were to follow the notation from my previous subproblems, then I want it to be opt v t I. So what is it? It is the minimum weight of a v to t path that uses at most I many edges along it. Okay, so not only do I keep track of a path between pair of vertices, so names of the two vertices, but I also keep track of how many edges from the graph does it take to go from V to T. You will immediately understand what I mean by timestamps. It's like when I traverse an edge, I think of it as one timestamp or one time step. And now I'm asking how many steps does it take to go from V to T when it achieves this amount of weight. Okay, so that's an interesting kind of a idea. Yeah, so maybe Kannad is trying to explain his DFS idea a little further. Let me read that. Sorry about this digression. So what he says is, ma'am, what I mean was considering the graph to be unweighted. Graph to be unweighted. Oh, I see. No, but then again, unweighted graph could all look like all weight one edges. And again, you may end up coming up with paths which have probably nothing to do with the original one. So I don't see why it should work, but it might. So on the fly, I may not be able to say that, may not be able to come up with a bad example for you, for your approach. But to me, if there is a part of the algorithm that's going to completely not consider the weights of the edges, then um, how will it work differently when all weights were equal to 1 versus they were not equal to 1 is not quite clear to me. Just give me,
Ma'am,
just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Hello? Sorry, please go ahead.
ma'am, I meant running the DFS as a pre-run, like before running the actual Bellman-Ford algorithm.
Uh-huh.
We just run the DFS to label the vertices with certain numbers so that they help us later on.
Okay. So I think then maybe what you want to do is BFS, not DFS. So you kind of mark the frontier of the graph. You know, how many steps does it take to reach a certain vertex? Is that something that you would do? Because DFS is going to give, I don't see how it will give some sort of an ordering to the vertices, but very likely it will not allow us, for instance, to count the number of steps the vertex is away from, they say, the source vertex or the target vertex. So maybe,
Ma'am, but we can take the finishing times of reaching those vertices. And
I
if we go from a vertex with a later finishing time, with an earlier finishing time to a later finishing time, we are running into a cycle.
okay, perfect. I think that will work. I understand now. Yeah. So what you're trying to say is give some sort of a ordering on the vertices, and now define subproblems to depend on that ordering plus the vertex comma target pair. Yeah, that is likely
Okay.
to work because then that will avoid cycles. If you say that it takes t time steps to reach a certain, say k time steps to reach a certain vertex and k minus 1 to the other, then you don't want a subroutine that is running for k minus 1 to query things which are related to k, something like this. You'll try to set it up in that way, I guess. It is possible that it will work, but what I'll show you is just a small modification of what we've seen will just work. Yeah, but yeah, I see now your idea, it might actually work. Yeah. So Sudhansh is saying, why can't we do a simple DFS and not expand into the nodes that we have already seen? Uh, how will you get the shortest paths through that? That's not quite clear. But we can discuss the strategy later on if you want. Huh. No, I think the people who are suggesting DFS mean it as a pre-processing step where we use it to kind of um, artificially remove cycles from the graph, if you will. So these time steps will say that, okay, you know what, when I traverse from S to T, along the way, if I see something, then that particular node, if at all, will come later or before a certain other node. And this ordering, if I sort of try to remember, then I use that when I try to design my uh, dynamic programming strategy over and above the DFS. I think that's what I am understanding. So otherwise, Chandrasekhar's argument, Chandrasekhar's contention is quite valid that just having DFS is not going to be useful because we won't still have values for the opt UV for smaller subproblems yet. That anyway needs to be computed. And that was what I also tried to say to Sudhanshu, that if you do DFS, it is not quite clear how overall the problem is getting solved. But maybe using Kannad's idea plus the fact that we still run Bellman and Ford as before may actually work. Now I see that. But in any case, actually, you don't need to do all that. You don't need any pre-processing really. Just a small tweak in how we define subproblems basically works. Okay, so that's what we are going to do. What we do is we artificially remove cycles, but we don't do that through some pre-processing or something like that. We just say that let me keep track of the subproblems which depend on the opt path, but also on the length of that path, where the length of the path is the number of edges along the path. Okay? So that's basically what we are planning to do. So what we do is we define subproblems to be opt of v comma I, which keeps track of the minimum weight path from v to t that uses at most I many edges. Finally, we wish to compute opt of s comma n minus 1, because if there is a path of minimum weight that is from s to t and there are no negative weight cycles in the graph, then there must be a path of length at most n minus 1 from s to t. Yeah, at most is important here. Like I said, this is because the graph is this is because the graph does not have negative cycles. Not that graph is acyclic, does not have negative cycles. I have a typo in my slides. Yeah, it should really be. This is because the graph does not have negative cycles. Right. So now for a vertex v and I between 1 to n minus 1, if we are able to compute opt of v comma I, then I want to say that we'll be done, because finally we will get opt of s comma n minus 1 through that, which is basically the weight of the path from weight of a at most n minus 1 edged path that goes from s to t, minimum such. So suppose these are my subproblems, then how shall I define my recursion? Recursion is now very simple to define. It's very, very similar to what we did in that previous approach when we had assumed that the graph was acyclic. How do we do that? I think all of you will be able to write the recursion at this step. I'm not going to ask you, but just think about it for a minute in your mind. You don't need to write it in the comments because it involves math symbols. But just think about it. I'm sure you'll get it right. Okay, so let me pause for 20 seconds here. Just think about what you will write as the recursion here. And I'm kind of 100% sure all of you will get it right. So if you have a pen and paper close to you, you can try to even write it for yourself. But if not, at least think about it. Right, so let me now tell you what it is. If a path uses at most I minus 1 edges, then, so this case you may not have considered when you thought about it to yourself, which is kind of natural, but keep track of it. So if the path uses at most I minus 1 edges, then in fact opt of v comma I will be opt of v comma I minus 1. That's one possibility. If indeed it uses full I edges, then there must be some u which is a neighbor of v, such that there is we have opt of u comma I minus 1. Then the opt of v comma I will be opt of u comma I minus 1 comma w of v u. Okay. Many times students make this mistake when they write the recursion that they forget a term like this. Recall, in our uh, um, sub-problems that we defined, um, as I told you already, at most is the key here. We have said exactly I we may not be able to keep track of very well, but what we can certainly keep track of if if does the minimum weight path use at most I edges, right? So if it is using I edges, well and good, then the recursion that you may have thought about will kick in. But it could use strictly less than I many edges also, in which case in the recursion, we won't be able to make progress in terms of the vertices, but we'll only be able to make progress in terms of the length. Okay. So this is often something that people forget, like one corner case or something. So just keep track of it. Okay. So now the overall recursion is this. And actually, I want to call this recursion. I keep referring to it later as this, but it has gone outside the scope of this slide. So let me just draw it here. So this is what we get as a recursion. What is this recursion? Let's just stare at it. As I said, either the path was never of full length I. It was anyway of length I minus 1. So in that case, this part of the recursion will kick in. But indeed, if there is an optimal path from V to T which achieves the full length I, then it must be that there is a neighbor along an optimal path, say U, that has an I minus 1 length path to T. Okay, but because we don't know which among the neighbors is the actual one, we'll have to do a min like before. So this term is a lot like the one that we had, but because we are dealing with at most I length paths, we also have this other term that we should not forget. Okay, so this is step 2. Let me pause here. There are already some doubts in the comments. If there are more, please put your comments in the comment box. So one of the questions is, isn't opt of v comma I minus 1 included in the second term? So the way I see it, it is not, because I don't assume that there is an edge from a vertex to itself. So when I say min over u in v such that v comma u is an edge, then u is a vertex strictly not equal to v. Okay. So in that sense, it is really not included in the second term. Any other questions? There is one more question. Opt of v comma I minus 1 means at most I minus 1 edges, which has to be included in opt of u I minus 1 2, right? If from v itself there is a length of at most I minus 1 path, then from u it may be only of length I minus 1 or lower. I mean, the second case in the recursion is like where the path length is tight, and the first is when the path length is not tight. I don't know whether I cleared your doubt, Sudhansh. If somebody else wants to respond to Sudhansh's doubt also, feel free to do that in the comments. So If one of you feels like I'm not explaining it well enough, and you can, please do that in the comments as well. Okay, let's go over to step 3 then. We have to decide the memoization strategy, and let me tell you, this is kind of the easy part of it. Now, we create a table M with n rows and n columns, and the v comma ith entry of M will contain the weight of the lowest weight path from V to T that uses at most I edges. Okay. So this is kind of completely guided by what we defined as our subproblems. There is no innovativeness here. It's just the innovativeness was in the part of coming up with the subproblem definition. Once you have that, memoization is guided completely by that choice. Step number 4, check that the subproblem dependencies are acyclic. Here is where we are going to use this fact that we made our subproblem dependent on the length of the path as well. From the recursion star, which I had marked as star, we know that the I subproblem uses values of subproblems of j, which is strictly less than I. In the recursion, you recall there were two terms. One was opt of v comma I minus 1. So I minus 1 there also. And the second one was min over u neighbors of v, opt of u comma I minus 1 plus weight of vu. So there also it was a smaller subproblem, namely it was being called for I minus 1 when we were trying to solve a problem at I. So always we are going to ask values of subproblems which are smaller on at least one of the coordinates. In the sense, in one of the two subproblems we saw in recursion star, one was only v comma I minus 1. So in terms of v, we really didn't make any progress. But definitely we only queried v for a smaller value of I, namely for I minus 1. So that was the advantage. Now this immediately gives a cyclicity of the underlying graph, because this is what a cyclicity anyway means. So now let me write down the pseudocode. As I told you, I was going to write down the pseudocode earlier on itself, but I didn't do it because we were going to solve this slightly harder version of the problem. So now let me write down the pseudocode. When you also define these 5 steps for the problem, if over and above in the exam, say I ask you to give the pseudocode, you should present a pseudocode, okay? Otherwise, I'll just ask you to write the 5 steps. So if I ask you to write the 5 steps, you don't need to write the pseudocode. But if I ask you over and above to write the pseudocode, you must. So let's start. The initialization is as follows. These 3 steps, whatever I've written on the slide right now, are just initialization steps. For t comma 0, that is weight of the path that reaches t using zero number of edges, I just say it is 0 because t can be reached from t without traversing any edge. So it's 0. And now for all other values, initializes to infinity. Now for I going from 1 to n minus 1, and for v, compute so we can cycle over in any order actually, but I should start from a smaller one. Okay. So compute v comma I using the recurrence. Okay. And once I go through everything, I will have at the end, because I will be n minus 1, we would have cycled through everything. So we would in the end have a value s comma n minus 1. So this is the full algorithm, Bellman and Ford algorithm. Let me pause here and see if there are any questions. Yeah, there is a comment that is answering a question that was asked previously. So those who are interested may look at that. I will not read it right now out loud. Thanks for answering in the comments. Okay. So let me anyway pause. People can read the comment and just convince themselves. Right. So now finally we come to this part where we just do the time analysis. Everything else is completely done. Okay. The time analysis is not very difficult. The algorithm is going to fill this table M that we defined in the pseudocode. The table has order of n square entries. Each entry can be filled in time O of n, like we argued previously for the other problem. In the same way, each entry can be filled in time O of n. So the total time is O of n cube. That's it. Okay. So that's really it. What we did here is we studied the Bellman and Ford algorithm for finding shortest paths in graphs which may have negative weights but no negative cycles. In the textbook, there is an adaptation of this algorithm for the case where the problem is slightly changed. The problem is now not to find the shortest path in a graph which has negative edges, but to find whether the graph has a negative weight cycle or not. Okay, so given a graph, check whether the graph has a negative weight cycle or not. If it has a negative weight cycle, you should say return 1, else return 0. Okay, there is a very simple adaptation of Bellman and Ford that can be done in order to solve that problem as well. Okay, so with that, let me end today's recording. And if you have any questions, please stay back and ask. There could be logistical questions about the quiz or any about the midsem or any other doubts. I'll just hang around till everybody leaves, and then, as usual, end the meeting when everybody's gone.